Hello students, welcome to all. This is Dr. Vigneshwar Meka, lecturer in geography, and here we shall discuss about approaches to study of human geography. In this chapter, we are going to study the following points. 1. Introduction to human geography. 2. Approaches of human geography. In this, traditional approaches in human geography and contemporary approaches in human geography. Firstly, we will start with the introduction. Human geography, similar to other social sciences, has been developed out of the necessity to describe some aspects of human beings' social, cultural, economic environment. Physical geography and human geography working together interdisciplinary research projects in order to develop a more complete understanding of the world. The learning outcomes. After the studying this chapter, you will be able to study the traditional approaches in human geography, recognize the contemporary approaches in human geography, and familiarize with the changing trends in the study of human geography. Now, we go to approaches to human geography. Human geography or anthropogeography is a branch of geography which focuses on human beings and their communities, culture, economic activities and interrelationships between human and natural environment by studying their relations with and across the spaces. However, the man and environment relationships are examined from diverse angles by various schools of human geographers. There are several approaches in human geography which can be categorized and studied, includes traditional approaches and contemporary approaches. Here is a compilation about the approaches to the study of human geography for UG second year students. This discipline has been passed through different stages of conceptual development in geographical thinking and approaches as the following. A. Traditional approaches to human geography. B. Contemporary approaches to human geography. Now, we start with traditional approaches to human geography. Human geography continues its basic objective to examine the various problems of different social groups in relation to their environment. The traditional approaches in human geography include systematic approach, regional approach, historical approach, environmental approach, possibilistic approach and Wittalian approach. First, the systematic approach. Systematic approach chooses a particular aspect of physical or human phenomena in a defined geographical space. The studies present it in an orderly manner according to a system. Oskar Peschel, a German geographer, initiated the movement and carried by Ferdinand Richthofen, supporting the application of genetic approach to deal with man-nature relation. Similarly, Röntgen observed the earth as an integral whole and interacting unity and considered human geography systematically and from a Darwinian point of view. Systematic approach is often useful to consider spatial issues through a general systems approach. A general system is a group of fundamental elements bound together by specific linkages or connections. In general, a system consists of a set of entities with specifications of relationships between entities and their environment. In early period, geographers have practiced forms of systems, but approaches are more philosophical rather than practical, and a system analysis of systems approach development after World War II. The systematic approach largely develops the effectiveness of a land use planning and natural resource management. The general ecosystems elements include quantitative, qualitative, behavioral, economic and political subsystems. The subsystems of qualitative includes finite space. The finite phase encompasses urban empty, rural, psychological and spaces of multiple use. The subsystem of qualitative is pigeonholed through concepts such as carrying capacity, system of ecological value, compatibility, suitability, capability and stability. The subsystems of economy include theory of economy and decision making, whereas the political subsystem involves inputs from citizens, bureaucracies and the governments. The behavioral subsystem are associated with attitudes, values, beliefs, customs and traditions. A general systems model is a complex in which variables are connected with a human system. Some variables may be measured quantitatively while some variables may not. The systematic approach encompasses the relationships between variables, and a change in one variable will resonate through the entire system. The second traditional approach is the regional approach. This approach is based on the fact that the surface of the earth is divided into mosaics of various regions, each of which has a specific character as consequence of the symbiosis between the physical environment and the society occupying it. This approach is introduced by Friedrich Rogel. This approach is basically related to the patterns and processes by considering the relationship between human beings and natural environment. This approach is better expressed in any cultural landscape. Analysis of patterns, processes, they express the spatial organizations in environmental space. In the early 20th century, Vidal de la Blache developed a regional school in France and emphasized on the relationships between man and immediate surroundings by the studying small homogeneous areas popularly known as space. Supporting this concept, Herbertson proposed scheme of natural regions of the world in 1905. Thus, Blache in France, Herbertson, Fawcett and Unstead in Britain, Whittlesey in USA presented regional schemes for economic, social, political purposes with the environmental setting. In Britain, Patrick Geddes put forward the idea of regionalism, where H.J. Floyd presented the concept of human regions. Contemporary geographers specified that the concept of region is relatively clear and compared with many troublesome concepts in other social sciences. According to Vance, the region is a homogeneous area with physical cultural characteristics distinct from those of neighboring areas. Similarly, Witkowski and Kolosov defined the region as a complex spatial socio-economic system characterized by a stable combination of political forces and possessing a specific complex of features. Regional approaches, after influenced by environmental determinism, steadily moved within geographical studies in other directions, permitting for the study of the interaction between human beings and the environment without looking casual linkages between the two, and contributing human geographers a clear, well-defined object of the study, having as key themes the concept of region and the interaction between humans and environments, in this way drastically changing the discipline. The third, historical approach. The historical approach denotes the temporal trends or the direction of growth stages. In this analysis, process is interpreted as a set of rules which modifies map forms over a period of time. In other words, its focus is on geographic analysis of a place of space through time. This concept encompasses the study of cultural geography, diffusion of innovation, geography of time, process form approach. In the 5th century, Herodotus, who is known as a father of history, in his works, discourse was on how the Nile River delta formed, which evidences the earliest examples of the historical geography. Historical geography, which studies the past geographies, continued without the progress till the end of the 17th century. Philip Clover, the founder of historical geography, in his work, A Historical Geography of Germany, contributed to the discipline by combining classic knowledge with knowledge of the land. In the 19th century, the geography importance as the basis for appreciating history was imparted in several universities, especially in United Kingdom. In 1930, historical analysis gained much importance by the study of occupations of human beings of a particular space over historic time intervals started by D.S. Whittlesey and Cousar. The Institute of British Geographers and Association of American Geographers, by establishing the Historical Geography Research Groups and the Journal of Historical Geography, assisted to justify the historical approach in geography. The 4th is environmental approach. This approach studies geography since very beginning and changed significantly. Views of this approach are very much similar to the determinism, that is, environment monitoring all human activities such as psychological, economic, social and political, etc. Determinists generally consider man as a passive agent on which environmental factors are actively acting and determining his attitude, decision making process and even lifestyle. The rise of determinism provided new dimension by some scientific validation of the concept of determinism. Frequently, geographers approach the analysis of the dynamics of environment from the standpoint of natural sciences. The role of society in the environment endure a main theme, but activities of human beings are analyzed as one of the several interconnected mechanisms of environmental changeability or variation. In general, determinists consider human beings as passive agents on which the environment factors are actively performing and controlling their attitude, decision making process, even lifestyle. The process of determinism afforded a new dimension through some scientific validation of the determinism concept. Frederick Rogel, by his works Anthropogeography and Political Geography, he samples influence of geographic environment. E. Huntington and H. J. Mackinder with their works influenced the determinism in early period of 20th century. Environmental approach was criticized and gave way towards the concept of possibilism after Second World War. The 5th, possibilistic approach. This approach focuses on the human being's role as a geographic agent and modifier of natural environment, and this concept was first developed by Vidal de la Blache during the early 20th century, but the possibilism term was first coined by French scholar Lucien Febvre. The possibilism places human being at a top level and esteems it as an active agent. The possibilistic approach focuses mainly on the role of woman as a geographic agent and natural environment modifier. Jean Brunes of France, H.J. Fleur in Britain, Isaiah Bowen and Carl O. Serre of USA, etc. were the important advocates of the possibilism. H.J. Fleur tried to delimit the world regions based on human characteristics rather than the traditional climatic biotic regions. Carl Serre and Burrow developed the theme of possibilism. Possibilists think that nature is never more than advice. Human beings, by their skills and the technological innovations, are capable to modify the difficulties of nature which come in progress, and believe that there are no limitations to the human choice in the land use. And the sixth traditional approach is Vidalian approach. The possibilistic view of environment relations developed by Lablache represented a middle course between the views of the French sociologist Emile Durkheim, who proposed that the study of social morphology, and the German geographer Friedrich Rothschild. In other words, this approach to the environment followed a middle course between strict environmentalism and extreme possibilism. The view that society and nature stood out as adversaries in the man and environment confrontation was rejected by Blache. For Blache, human was part of living creation, that is nature, and therefore its most active collaborator. Lucien Febvre, a French historian, supported views of Vidal in his famous phrase, "There are not necessities but everywhere possibilities, and man as a master of these possibilities and the judge of their use." The point of view attempts human in the first place, and he is the one who takes the decisions. Now, contemporary approaches to human geography. Contemporary geographical possibilism begins with cultural inference, as in how the observations and views executed by society among human beings, in fact, determine how human societies interact with the natural environment. Contemporary society is distinct from the previous mechanical societies where the rules were more comprehensible, and instead is highly differentiated and organized. As such, there is a necessity for an epistemological critique of both human societies and their interaction with the natural environment. The contemporary approaches in human geography are ecological approach, spatial approach, behavioral approach, humanistic approach, a welfare approach, and a Marxist approach. Now, let us discuss each of these approaches. The first, ecological approach. This is an approach mainly concerned with massive interacting system between human and environment. Burroughs, a pioneer of ecology, declared that geography is the science of human ecology. He also stated that the concentration of geographer should be on human ecology, which is a subfield of ecology, that is a science that study the relationships between the living organisms and their natural environment and among organisms. The ecological approach to the distribution associates physiological characters of organisms with pertinent environmental variables. Each organism has particular physiological acceptance and necessities. Stoddart, another devotee of ecology, expressed with the formal development of new ecological science, there were many attempts to restate fundamentals of human activities in biotic terms. In 1910s, human ecology was applied for the study of man and environment for human species in the web of life or natural economy. In recent past, the holistic ecological approach has initiated acceptance. In order to achieve this objective, the biotic indicators, living organisms, could be employed in monitoring the environmental programs for different applications, such as forecast warning of environmental issue earlier, recognize the causal relationship between the potential factors of alteration and resulting biotic impacts, assess the general state of the environmental stress by their numerous ways of responses, and estimate the measure of restoration efficiency on the health of biological system. The second, spatial approach. Spatial approach is a new approach in human geography, which also known as locational analysis or approach. Focuses on spatial organization. In 1950s, this approach has been started in USA, and Harold McCarty, John Weaver, W.L. Garrison, Edward Ullman, and J.Q. Stewart, etc. were the important advocates. Since the quantitative techniques applied in analysis, this approach is treated as quantitative approach. The uses of explanatory models and regression, correlation and variance analysis, etc. have been observed in this approach. The spatial analysis uses the concepts of location, distance, space, accessibility and spatial interaction. In mid-1950s, locational analysis with the use of quantitative techniques and methodologies and with space concept as fundamental variable affecting both organization and operation of society and behavior of its individual acquired much popularity. The third one, behavioral approach. This is an approach to human geography and in specific to the processes accountable for spatial behavior of human beings, which particularly attracted behavioralism or on cognition as a key to understand the spatial behavior of humans. The behavioral approach is deep rooted in the world as perceived rather than in the world reality. The main aim of this approach is to develop models for humanity which were alternative to the spatial location theories developed through quantitative revolution. The roots of this approach can be traced to the works of classical geographers, but the viewpoint developed stronger in late 1960s. The concept of behavioralism began in 1920s and 1930s, but the first behavioral model was advocated by William Keck in 1951 through demonstrating the difference between behavioral environment and the phenomenal environment. Keats, Julian Wolpert, Peter Gore, Orwell, White and Gore, Downes and Stewart were the important advocates to this approach. The fourth approach is humanistic approach. This approach gives human geography awareness, human agency, human consciousness and human creativity. It attempts to understand meaning, value and the human significance of life events. This approach views what the human person is and can do. This approach is found in the seminal works of Annie Bettimer and Wai-Fu Tuan in 1970s and 1980s. In 1980s, several humanistic approaches have been advocated. However, this approach is mainly based on the three philosophies of idealism, phenomenology, and existentialism. Idealism, as a counter to postulates of positivism, Harris and Leonard Gulke advocated the philosophy of idealism. The idealism is a system of philosophy which regards reality as residing in or constituted by the mind. This philosophy limits human understanding to perception of external objects. Phenomenology. The phenomenology philosophy was much popular among the human geographers than the idealism. However, the term was first coined by Searle in 1925. This philosophy became popular in 1970s when the Rolfe first attempted to introduce the phenomenological approach within geography. Existentialism. The term existentialism was coined by Jean-Paul Sartre, the famous of the existentialist, to refer to a range of mid-20th century European philosophers who studied the conditions of humanity. Sartre, Albert Camus, and Gabriel Marcel in France, Jaspers Martin Buber in Germany, Ortega y Gasset in Spain, and Marais, novelists and playwrights who promoted a historical genre based on existential conditions. This approach identifies man is responsible for its own action and is free to choose its development and action. Welfare approach. This is a contemporary approach to human geography which focuses questions of spatial inequalities, countries and social groups, as well as territorial justice. This approach, raised in 1960s, focuses the importance to recognize and describe the existence of poverty, hunger, crime and other forms of discriminations and disadvantages, and access to social service. This welfare approach in contemporary human geography was progressed by D.M. Smith and focused on regarding who gets what, where and how could be judged against alternatives. Welfare approach developed as a possible reaction to the positivism, quantitative revolution and model building, which was thought to be insufficiently concerned with contemporary problems of human societies. Most of the welfare studies are descriptive. The sixth contemporary approach in human geography is Marxist approach. This approach in human geography developed in 1970s as a reaction to capitalism. This approach is a perspective within historical materialism which is centrally concerned with the ways in which the space, production, landforms concerned in the reproduction of specific social formations. Its main emphasis is on unequal development, regional disparities, deprivation, discrimination, exploitation and environmental degradation of the workers by those who own the means of production. The Marxist approach in human geography is on the basis of 4 points as in the following. 1. Describing the means by which capitalists exploited workers. 2. Advocating a change from private ownership to state control of property. 3. Denouncing the religion as the opium of the people. And 4. Preparing for the inevitable revolution that when it came would eliminate the class system. And Marxism philosophy, many human geographers strongly felt that their work should be mainly focused on social and environmental problems and contribute to solutions to those problems.